Greetings, followers of the Dark Knight. As always, thanks for watching. Today we have a little car science, and I think for those of you who follow my channel, we had done the linear throttle on the Dark Knight. So today I'll just walk you through a few more mods that happened to have been done just to help with acceleration map calibration and also just give the drive a finer feel. So in here I had to go in to plug in a few extra relays and some neatened up wiring. Nothing too fancy. In bone stock configuration, this setup comes with a switched throttle position sensor. Basically, it's a tripole switch that tells the management whether you're on closed, partial, or full throttle. And that's done by basically 3 switches, as you see here. It bridges contact 1 and 2 for idle. It bridges none of the contacts for partial, and 2 and 3 for full throttle, which is okay in a stock setup. But since we have some custom configurations here, it helps to have a linear throttle that gives percentages, and that is primarily for the eManage Ultimate. Since the internet never sleeps, I had done some homework and found some cheeky way of fooling the management to use the variable or linear throttle, which works okay, but the car tends to idle too rich and you get very poor economy, because at any given point the VCC signal, which is being tapped from the manifold absolute pressure sensor, it leaks some current to the VTA node, which is what the ECU expects to see when you're at full throttle. And because of that, you will get one of two things. Either the management will throw a code 41, if I recall correctly, which is the TPS short or open error code, or you will get bad fueling and economy. And a way to try and counter that is to deal some gates on the connections. Gates here being diodes. And that works, but only to an extent, because the idle pole, if I may call it that, supplies a 12-volt feed, which when grounded, the ECU will know that you're at idle. In contrary to the full throttle feed, which is a 5-volt feed. So the diodes just prevent the voltage clashes and, you know, keeps everything tidy, but it doesn't solve your problem, because there will still be that voltage current through the PSW stroke VTA node that the ECU is expecting to see when you're at full throttle. So just to run through this very quickly, the linear TPS, which is available from the auto-boxed versions of the Glanza or the GTs, is fairly simple. It has 4 terminals, one being the feed to the variable core, the second being the readout, or rather the signal from the variable core, fourth being the ground, and third being the idle switch. So the idle and ground are pretty dummy proof. Those don't need any configurations. But our main problem is the VCC and the full throttle feed, which needs a little bit of tinkering to make work with the manual ECU. So now this is the fun part, because this is where configurations take place. So after you're done calibrating your throttle, setting the maximum minimum voltages and making sure everything is okay, you need to activate a map. And you have a choice of either the NVCS, which is a Nissan valve control solenoid something, or auxiliary output settings. Basically can be used for VTEC and the likes. I chose VTEC, the auxiliary output setting, because it outputs a 12-volt feed from the E-manage in comparison to the what is it called, to the NVCS one that grounds a relay or whatever you connect to it. I preferred the auxiliary output because it was going to tidy up my wiring a lot more. So sorry for the zoom. So once set up, of course you need to make all the jumper settings and everything on the E-manage to make it happy. I decided to go with the TPS as my input parameter, and what then happens is you give it an RPM range and a TPS range. And in this case, since I am using an additional relay to control the VTA signal going to the stock ECU, I set up my wide open throttle to start at 70%. So you basically just click the cell to change it on or off, and you adjust the entire range. So if you go to the vehicle data log feature, it allows you to view live data streams from the E-manage, and as you can see, my throttle is already calibrated, so anytime I input throttle, it will tell me where I'm at. This will be very helpful in acceleration map configurations and also power map configurations where you need sharp throttle response. So as you can see, my TPS is set to go wide open at 70%. So the auxiliary output will stay in the off position until you attain 70%. Here, let's go for that. 50, 60, 70. When that happens, the E-manage will activate the auxiliary output, which is basically a relay telling the stock ECU that we are now at wide open throttle. So that is a very big leap for me, because it allows my tuning curve to be very, very well done. So now back to my scrapbook. After doing all the measurements and checks with the linear throttle and getting all the pin configurations from the E-manage, I decided to go with the, as I'd explained earlier, the VTEC option instead of the Nissan variable valve control, because I already have two of my features running that: the rad fan solenoid control and electronic boost control. So I have two channels left, but I want to preserve those for my exhaust butterfly, which will open a flap when I'm at certain RPMs, or my air brake, which will engage when I'm at a certain speed and certain throttle. So yeah, in a nutshell, you just have to do all the usual housekeeping. Check the jumpers on the E-manage, make sure they're correctly configured. In this particular case, jumper 10 needs to be set to position 2 and 3, and then use the VTEC out on connector B. Then of course this feeds a relay which is grounded when you attain whatever presets you have on the configuration chart. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Works like a charm. Next session is to go to the rolling road and see if I can set up a base map. One thing I forgot to mention is that instead of reinventing the wheel and pulling an extra cable through the firewall for your linear throttle config, you can simply reuse the VTA cable that is intended to feed the stock ECU. So you use that, tap it and give the feed to the E-manage, and then of course set up your relay to trigger the, I think it's pin number 10 on connector 2, trigger it to E2, which is sensor ground. So it makes everything nice and tidy.